September 1944, somewhere above the jungles of Borneo, and the sky is about to belong to one man. Twin engines hum with a predator's patience as Major Richard Ira Bong banks his P-38 Lightning into position, the aircraft responding to his touch like an extension of his own hands. And below him, rising through scattered clouds, a formation of Japanese fighters claws desperately toward American bombers, completely unaware that death is already diving toward them from above. The enemy pilots can't see him yet, can't know that the quiet farm boy from Wisconsin, now lining them up in his gun sight, has already sent dozens of their brothers spiraling into the Pacific, can't possibly understand that they're about to face the most lethal fighter pilot in American history. 40 confirmed kills, a record that will stand untouched for 80 years and counting, a number so extraordinary that no American pilot before or since has ever come close. And this is the moment when legend and reality become the same thing, when a gentle young man from the frozen north becomes an instrument of precision warfare, when history watches through bulletproof glass as one more engagement begins. This isn't a story about natural-born killers or men who loved war. This is about something far more interesting, about how discipline defeats instinct, how patience becomes deadlier than aggression, and how the most unassuming pilot in the Pacific theater became the one enemy fighters feared most. The path to 40 victories didn't start with heroism. It started with something far more American, with a young hotshot making stupid decisions and nearly destroying his career before it even began. Hamilton Field, California, and Second Lieutenant Richard Bong is fresh out of flight school at Luke Field, Arizona, with limited hours in the P-38, still learning how the twin-engine beast handles, still figuring out what the Lightning can do. And then, one day he decides to find out by buzzing, downtown San Francisco, in an unauthorized aerobatic display that violates every regulation in the Army Air Forces. Handbook reports from that day describe a P-38 screaming through the Bay Area at low altitude, rolling and diving with the kind of showboating skill that should have ended his military career on the spot. And when his commanding officer, General George Kenney, hears about it, the reprimand comes down hard and immediate, the kind of discipline that grounds pilots permanently and sends them home in disgrace. But Kenney, one of the sharpest commanders in the Pacific, sees something beneath the recklessness that makes him pause, sees aircraft control that borders on supernatural, spatial awareness that seems to operate on instinct, reflexes that process information faster than most men can think, and instead of ending Bong's career, Kenney assigns him additional training and keeps him under close observation, waiting to see if this farm kid with magic hands can channel that talent into something the war can use. What Kenney recognized that day was the difference between pilots who are merely good and the ones who become legends. The ability to calculate deflection angles without thinking, to judge distance and closure rate with perfect accuracy, to remain calm when the sky fills with tracer fire and enemy fighters are diving from every direction. And those are skills you can't teach, qualities you can only cultivate in the rare pilots born, with them already wired into their DNA. By September 1942, Bong is assigned to the 9th Fighter Squadron of the 49th Fighter Group, shipping out to New Guinea as part of the 5th Air Force with limited combat experience and a future that remains entirely unwritten. And waiting for him across the Pacific are Japanese pilots who've been fighting continuously since 1937, veterans of China and the Philippines who've survived brutal air battles that killed most of their original squadrons, men who know every trick of aerial combat and aren't impressed by American farm boys learning to fly. The odds, on paper at least, favor the enemy by a considerable margin. Experience against enthusiasm, veterans against rookies. And nobody that December knows that the quiet kid from Wisconsin is about to rewrite the entire equation. December 1942, above Buna, New Guinea, and Bong's first real taste of combat comes fast and without mercy. P-38s from the 9th climbing hard to intercept Japanese bombers protected by the legendary Zero fighters, and Lieutenant Bong flies wing position as enemy formations materialize against the tropical clouds like sharks emerging from deep water. Mitsubishi bombers, in tight formation with A6M Zeros, weaving protective patterns around them. And suddenly, everything from training becomes real. Live ammunition, real enemies, actual death riding on every decision. The P-38 Lightning is unlike anything the Japanese have encountered before. A twin-boom design that looks like something from science fiction, with its twin Allison engines, tricycle landing gear, and counter-rotating propellers that eliminate the torque issues that kill so many pilots in single-engine fighters, and mounted in the nose, 450 caliber machine guns alongside a 20mm cannon create a concentration of firepower that can saw enemy aircraft in half when the aim is true. Top speed exceeding 400 miles per hour, service ceiling above 40,000 feet. The Lightning can outrun and outclimb almost anything Japan can put in the air, and that performance advantage becomes the foundation of everything Bong will build his career upon. But there's a catch. There's always a catch. And the P-38's Achilles heel is maneuverability at lower speeds where the Zero absolutely dominates, turning inside American fighters with an agility that seems impossible. Japanese pilots who are masters of slow-speed dogfighting can exploit this weakness ruthlessly, and American pilots who try to turn with Zeros tend to die quickly and violently, spinning into the jungle or the ocean with their tactical mistakes written in smoke across the sky. Bong doesn't try to turn, not even once, and that decision, that fundamental understanding of his aircraft's strengths and limitations, becomes the first principle of his survival and success. His early kills come when he learns to fight the P-38's way, rather than the way fighter pilots traditionally fought, using speed instead of maneuverability, altitude instead of agility, and that nose-mounted firepower that creates a cone of destruction anything caught in the convergence zone. And when enemy aircraft wander into that killing space, the results are often catastrophic. Wings shredding, engines exploding, aircraft disintegrating so fast the pilots never have time to react. Bong's combat reports after these early missions are characteristically understated, noting altitude and engagement conditions with the kind of bland precision that makes extraordinary violence sound routine. But what becomes immediately clear to anyone reading those reports is his understanding of how to make the Lightning into a weapon of surgical precision. Don't turn. Don't dogfight. Use speed and altitude and firepower. Position carefully, fire precisely, disengage immediately. And over the next 3 years, he'll refine this philosophy into a system of remarkable and deadly efficiency. The P-38 Lightning, designed by Lockheed's legendary engineer Clarence Kelly Johnson, represents a revolutionary approach to fighter design that requires equally revolutionary tactics to exploit properly. And its twin Allison V1710 engines deliver performance that seems almost magical to pilots accustomed to single-engine fighters. But the aircraft carries quirks that kill inexperienced pilots with brutal regularity. The counter-rotating propellers eliminate torque, but create unusual handling characteristics that feel wrong to pilots trained on conventional fighters. The turbo superchargers are temperamental and demand constant attention. And most dangerously, the P-38 suffers from compressibility in high-speed dives where shock waves form on the wings and cause control problems that can send the aircraft into unrecoverable spins. And dozens of American pilots die learning these limitations the hard way, their Lightnings tumbling into the Pacific or exploding against jungle mountainsides. Bong masters every one of these quirks, learning the Lightning's language until he can feel what the aircraft needs before instruments tell him. And his tactical evolution happens with remarkable speed as combat experience converts natural talent into refined skill. By early 1943, he's racked up multiple confirmed victories and earned a growing reputation as an exceptional marksman among pilots who respect nothing except results. And while other pilots fire long bursts that expend ammunition in wasteful streams of tracers, Bong fires short, precise bursts that conserve ammunition and maximize effectiveness. His gun camera footage showing consistent patterns that become his signature. Patient stalking, careful positioning, brief firing pass, immediate disengagement before enemy fighters can respond. Major Thomas Lynch, Bong's squadron mate and fellow ace, describes his technique as patient and precise in a way that makes it sound simple, even though most pilots can never replicate it. Watching Bong position himself carefully through extensive maneuvering to gain advantage, then close to effective range and fire-controlled bursts with the kind of ammunition efficiency that exceeds average pilot performance by extraordinary margins. The key to everything Bong does is deflection shooting, the ability to calculate where a moving target will be when bullets arrive rather than where it is when fired. And this mental calculation, accounting for target speed and direction, projectile velocity and drop, closure rate and angle of attack, all processed instantaneously while flying at 300 miles per hour with enemy fighters trying to kill you, separates the aces from the pilots who barely survive their tours. Most pilots struggle with these calculations their entire careers. Most never master it completely. But Bong's ability to make these adjustments instinctively, moving controls smoothly and placing fire with almost supernatural accuracy, sets him apart from everyone else in the Pacific Theater and makes him the one pilot Japanese fighters learn to avoid when they recognize his markings. July 1943, above Lace, New Guinea, and Bong's victory count continues its steady climb as Japanese bombers escorted by Zeros attempt to attack Allied positions. American fighters scrambling to intercept, and the engagement that follows demonstrates Bong's evolving tactical sophistication in ways that textbooks will later study. Instead of diving immediately like most aggressive pilots would, Bong positions his flight with altitude advantage and then waits, scanning the formation below for gaps in defensive coverage, looking for those critical moments when bombers are exposed and escorts are out of position. And then he strikes with the patience of a surgeon and the violence of a predator, diving from altitude at high speed with his P-38 attacking before defenders can react effectively, engaging bombers with that concentrated firepower that can destroy aircraft in seconds when accurately aimed. The combined output of 4 machine guns and 1 cannon creates impressive destructive capability at effective ranges, and Bong's approach emphasizes converting altitude into speed, making high-speed attack passes, then climbing back to altitude for another engagement before enemy fighters can organize a response. And Japanese fighters, with their superior maneuverability at lower speeds, often can't intercept the faster P-38s using these tactics, leaving them frustrated and helpless as American pilots control the engagement. Parameters, multiple kills in single missions become increasingly common for Bong, while his ammunition expenditure per kill remains notably low compared to average pilot performance, and American formations using these tactics achieve favorable results with minimal losses, turning the air war over New Guinea into a one-sided affair where experience and tactics overcome numbers and determination. Japanese forces analyzing combat reports from surviving pilots begin, noting patterns in American fighter tactics. Attacks from altitude, rapid engagement and disengagement, high-precision strikes from specific aircraft, and reports start identifying particular P-38s by their markings, including one marked with the name Marge after Bong's girlfriend back in Wisconsin. And enemy pilots start warning each other about the American with the farm boy face who fights like a machine, precise and patient and absolutely lethal. By November 1943, Bong has 21 confirmed victories, making him one of America's top aces. And General Kenny personally decorates him with the Distinguished Service Cross before sending him back to the United States for a war bond tour that the American public eagerly embraces. Here's the hero they've been waiting for, the young pilot who's been highly successful against Japanese forces. Clean-cut and humble, with that Midwestern sincerity that photographs beautifully. But Bong hates every minute of the publicity tour and requests return to combat with the kind of insistence that makes it clear he'd rather face Zeros than reporters. By March 1944, he's back in New Guinea flying an upgraded P-38J with improved engines, better cockpit heating that makes high-altitude missions less miserable, and hydraulically boosted ailerons that improve high-speed maneuverability and make the Lightning even more effective in the hands of a pilot who understands how to use these improvements. The Japanese Air Forces, by this point, are struggling to replace losses from years of attrition warfare, fielding many pilots with limited training, kids barely out of flight school who don't have the hundreds of hours that American pilots accumulate before seeing combat. And the experience gap has become significant and deadly, turning what was once an even fight into something that resembles a shooting gallery where veterans like Bong can rack up kills with clinical efficiency. April 1944. Above Hollandia, New Guinea, and Bong is leading flights on bomber escort when intelligence reports numerous Japanese fighters attempting to intercept American strike packages, and his tactical approaches continue evolving as he learns to position formations advantageously, maintain altitude superiority when possible, time attacks to exploit enemy vulnerabilities with the kind of tactical thinking that comes from experience and natural talent working together. Engagements often result in favorable kill ratios as Bong personally continues, adding to his victory total while leading effective defensive operations for bomber formations. And his technique by now emphasizes several core principles that have become almost automatic. Maintain energy advantage through altitude, use speed for engagement and disengagement, exploit the P-38's firepower concentration, avoid turning fights that negate American advantages, and execute every attack with the kind of precision that makes it look easy, even when it absolutely isn't. Head-on attacks require nerve and precise timing because engagement windows are brutally brief. Most pilots break off early because the closure rate is terrifying, and the human instinct for self-preservation kicks in hard when you're flying directly toward an enemy fighter at combined speeds exceeding 600 miles per hour. But Bong's willingness to maintain attack runs until the last possible second gives him consistent advantages, pressing the attack while enemy pilots flinch, converting courage into kill confirmations. When Japanese fighters attempt diving escapes, Bong pursues with his P-38 capable of maintaining high speeds in dives that many enemy aircraft can't match safely, and his ammunition efficiency remains exceptional in ways that puzzle intelligence officers analyzing combat reports. While specific round counts vary in different records, his confirmed kills per sortie ratio and ammunition usage patterns are significantly better than average pilot performance, suggesting either supernatural accuracy or a level of discipline most pilots never achieve. By June 1944, Bong's victory total stands at 28. Surpassing Eddie Rickenbacker's World War I record of 26 and making him America's highest-scoring ace in history. And General Kenny initially prohibits Bong from routine combat missions, declaring him too valuable to risk in daily operations. But Bong, frustrated at being grounded while his squadron continues fighting, advocates for return to operations with the kind of persistence that eventually wears Kenny down. Kenny relents, but with restrictions. Bong can fly, but primarily as flight leader on high-priority missions, with experienced pilots providing coverage. And the general is attempting to protect his most successful ace, while still using his skills where they matter most. But the restrictions don't significantly slow Bong's kill rate, because flying priority missions often means facing the most capable enemy pilots, and defeating them adds to his total just as effectively as routine patrols would. October 1944, above Balikpapan, Borneo, and a large-scale Japanese counterattack against American bombers striking oil refineries brings Bong and his P-38s climbing hard to intercept. And his tactical approach emphasizes positioning formations with sun advantage and altitude superiority, then timing attacks for when enemy fighters are focused on bomber targets and vulnerable to strikes from unexpected angles. Initial attacks are often highly effective with multiple enemy aircraft destroyed rapidly as Bong's flight executes coordinated strikes with the precision of a military drill. But increasingly, Japanese forces employ coordinated responses, learning from previous defeats, adapting their tactics, making every engagement more challenging than the last. During one engagement, Bong's aircraft sustains combat damage, including engine hits that would send most pilots running for home immediately. But instead of disengaging, Bong feathers the damaged engine, activates fire suppression systems, and continues engaging on single-engine power. And the P-38, designed with redundancy specifically for this kind of situation, can fly and fight on one engine though performance degrades significantly and the aircraft handles like it's fighting him with every control input. Despite the damage and reduced performance, Bong continues the engagement and scores additional kills before finally turning toward base on compromised systems. And his damaged aircraft, when it lands, shows multiple hits that make ground crews shake their heads in disbelief, assessing extensive damage that, by all logic, should have killed him, or at least forced immediate withdrawal. But the aircraft was combat effective enough to keep fighting, and after repairs are completed, Bong flies the same fighter successfully on future missions. By December 1944, Bong has 40 confirmed victories, a number so extraordinary that General Kenny, under direct orders from General Douglas MacArthur, permanently grounds America's top ace, deciding that Bong is too valuable as a symbol and training asset to risk in further combat, that his propaganda value and his knowledge exceed the tactical benefit of one more pilot in the air. Bong's final combat mission comes on December 17, 1944, a patrol that results in no enemy contact, no dramatic final battle, no cinematic ending, just a quiet flight over familiar territory before heading home, and he returns to the United States as America's highest-scoring fighter pilot, recipient of the Medal of Honor, and a national hero whose face appears in newspapers and newsreels across the country. But the statistics, as impressive as they are, tell only part of the story, because the real measure of Bong's impact isn't just the 40 aircraft he destroyed. It's the bomber crews he protected who dropped their ordnance and returned home safely, the ground troops who received air support from missions he flew, the tactical innovations he pioneered that became standard doctrine for American fighter pilots throughout the Pacific and saved countless lives by teaching pilots how to survive while remaining effective. His gunnery techniques were incorporated into training manuals that new pilots studied religiously. His tactical approaches using altitude advantage, attacking from favorable positions, exploiting the P-38's strengths while avoiding its weaknesses became fundamental fighter doctrine that squadrons implemented as standard operating procedure. And new pilots studied his gun camera footage and combat reports like sacred texts, learning from his example how to transform natural talent into combat effectiveness. Japanese pilots who survived the war and were later interviewed in the decades after described encountering highly skilled American pilots who used altitude, speed, and concentrated firepower effectively in ways that were extremely difficult to counter. And while they wouldn't have known Bong's name during the war, they acknowledged facing opponents whose precision and tactical disciplines represented a level of aerial combat, skill that challenged everything they thought. They knew about air warfare. Letters to his fiancée, Marge Vattendahl, reveal a thoughtful young man who understood the gravity of his role without being consumed by it, and in correspondence that survives, Bong reflects that he's focused on doing his job effectively, protecting bomber formations and supporting ground operations. The language deliberately understated in that Midwestern way that treats extraordinary accomplishment as merely competent performance of duty. The P-38 Lightning deserves recognition as one of history's most successful fighter designs. Over 10,000 produced during the war, serving in every theater from Europe to the Pacific, and in the Pacific theater with pilots who understood how to exploit its characteristics. The Lightning became highly effective in ways that changed the calculus of aerial combat. The twin-engine configuration provided redundancy that improved survivability. Pilots who lost an engine could still fly home rather than bailing out over enemy territory. The tricycle landing gear improved ground handling and reduced landing accidents that plagued tail-dragger fighters. And the nose-mounted weapons eliminated convergence issues that affected wing-mounted guns. Every round from every gun converging at the same point, creating that devastating cone of fire that Bong exploited so effectively. The turbo superchargers delivered high-altitude performance that many Japanese fighters couldn't match, giving American pilots the freedom to control engagement altitude and dictate the terms of combat. And the concentrated firepower, 450 caliber machine guns combined with a 20mm cannon, created impressive destructive capability at effective ranges that could destroy aircraft rapidly when accurately aimed. Bong, with his exceptional marksmanship and deflection shooting skills, achieved remarkably short engagement times. Technical analysis of gun camera footage by Army Air Forces experts showing that his hit percentage was extraordinarily high compared to average fighter pilots. And while exact percentages vary in different analyses, his accuracy was consistently noted as exceptional, far exceeding typical pilot performance by margins that seem almost impossible. August 6, 1945, Burbank, California, at the Lockheed Air Terminal, and Major Richard Bong, recently married to Marge and assigned as a test pilot for Lockheed, is conducting acceptance flights on new P-80 Shooting Star jet fighters, America's first operational jet aircraft representing the future of aviation with jet engines producing 4,000 pounds of thrust and speeds exceeding 500 miles per hour. Cutting-edge technology that makes piston fighters obsolete almost overnight. Bong is transitioning from P-38s to jets, learning an entirely new flight regime where speed and power demand different thinking and different reflexes. And that afternoon, during a test flight, his P-80 suffers catastrophic fuel pump failure shortly after takeoff, the engine failing at low altitude, leaving insufficient time or altitude for recovery procedures. And Bong attempts restart procedures that don't work, attempts to reach the runway, but can't make the distance, and in the final seconds, attempts to bail out. But the altitude is just too low. The P-80 crashes, and Major Richard Ira Bong, America's ace of aces, the farm boy from Wisconsin who became the most lethal fighter pilot in United States history, dies instantly at 24 years old. The same day, an American B-29 bomber named Enola Gay drops an atomic bomb on Hiroshima, Japan, and the news of Bong's death receives limited coverage beneath headlines announcing the atomic age and the beginning of the end of World War II. His death a footnote to history. On a day when history itself changed forever. 80 years later, Richard Bong's record of 40 confirmed victories remains unbroken, and likely will remain so permanently because modern air combat, dominated by beyond visual range missiles and radar-guided weapons, will never again produce the close-range dogfighting that characterized World War II aerial combat. The age of aces is over, and Bong stands at its pinnacle. The young pilot who faced disciplinary issues early in his career became a legend by mastering fundamentals, patience and precision, and effective deflection shooting. And he didn't rely on aggression or recklessness. He relied on calculated positioning and flawless execution, where every engagement reflected careful planning and every kill resulted from proper positioning and accurate fire. At the Richard I Bong Veterans Historical Center in Superior, Wisconsin, visitors can see his Medal of Honor and his flight logs documenting 200 combat missions, displays honoring his service alongside a restored P-38 with Marge nose art representing his wartime aircraft, and General George Kenney, who recognized Bong's potential early and supported his development, later wrote that Bong was the most effective fighter pilot he observed during the entire war. Kenney noted that Bong's approach emphasized precision and technique rather than aggression, making effectiveness look effortless through consistent application of sound tactical principles, the kind of natural grace that makes extraordinary performance seem routine. The battlefields where Bong earned his 40 victories are peaceful now, the jungles of New Guinea and the skies over Borneo quiet, except for commercial aircraft and the occasional military patrol. And the wrecks of Japanese fighters have long since deteriorated into tropical soil, aluminum and steel returning to the earth while their pilots' names fade from memory. But the record remains, carved in history like stone. The young man from Wisconsin who became America's deadliest fighter pilot. The ace of aces who turned precision and discipline into highly effective combat performance that no one has matched in 8 decades. 40 confirmed victories, survival through 200 combat missions, complete success in air-to-air engagements where he never lost a wingman and never failed to protect his assigned bombers. And the numbers tell a story that words struggle to capture. The record speaks for itself with the kind of clarity that transcends analysis. Nearly 8 decades later, no American pilot has surpassed what Richard Ira Bong accomplished during Pacific combat. And in an age of stealth fighters and drone warfare, no one ever will, making him not just the greatest American fighter pilot of World War II, but the greatest American fighter pilot in history. Period. Exceptional precision in aerial warfare, delivered through careful positioning and accurate fire from a farm boy who never wanted glory, just wanted to do his job and protect his brothers and come home to the girl whose name he painted on his aircraft. And when the engines finally went silent and the guns cooled and the record was written, Richard Bong stood alone at the summit of American aerial combat achievement, a place he'll occupy forever.